Simple questions for 100 people. I'm Bill Correll, and this is my investigation, my research project to gather data from 100 beautiful human beings for the sole purpose to see what actually happens across the interviews. The questions are fixed, and all the interviews will remain consistent, with the variable being the actual participants themselves and their answers. So it's as if I'm having you come sit on my porch, Catherine, to share your thoughts so that I can learn about people. Looking forward to what we're going to know after we've conducted this whole thing, but mostly I'm interested in the people, the process, and of course, your particular story. So it's my distinct pleasure to introduce, well, no, I'll let you do that. What is your full name?
My full name, Bill, is Katharine McMahon.
Nice. Any middle name?
Yes, but I don't normally share it publicly.
Oh, is that one of those deals where if you tell me you have to kill me afterwards?
I would never kill you, Bill, because you're lovely to speak with.
Oh,
But
there is
it's one of those things. I don't sign with it. I have one, but I just never use it.
That's very interesting. And I will tell you, out of almost 40 interviews that we've done, sooner or later, almost everybody has given up the goods on their middle name.
That sounds like a challenge.
Yeah, you want to be the first?
I might. We'll see. We'll see how our conversation goes. You
It
can
could
never tell.
absolutely. It could voluntarily just slip out at some point. You never know. These
Good.
things have a way of, taking on their own life, right?
It does. But, a lady has to keep some secrets, some mystery.
I like that line of thinking. For the most part, I don't like too many mysteries. I like to have a clue anyway, right?
Well, I
So
figure you're gonna get a lot out of me with all these questions. So, there's that.
I promise, I promise we will have a ball. So let's move on. What's your favorite nickname that most people don't know?
Those closest to me, call me Kat, but with a K, not a C.
Right.
And that actually started from a ninth grade geometry teacher, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Yep, he was the first one. 3 of his favorite students, he shortened our names because I don't know, I guess he thought they were all too long, but, mine became Cat Mac, which was a shortened Katharine McMahon,
Yep.
and one of my good friends started just calling me Kat, and it kind of stuck, and it's what my dad called me, and yeah, so it kinda stuck after that point, but my ninth grade geometry teacher gets credit for starting it.
Any other pet names that somebody might have for you or a nickname here and there?
No, I tried, um, other nicknames. My family, when I was really young, called me Kathy, but I don't really like that version. Um, although I will say my aunt Jackie, who was a lovely human, she has passed on now, despite many years of trying to get her to stop calling me Kathy, she called me Kathy literally until the end of her life. It was her name for me and it stuck.
At some point, it starts to get into that domain of really not worth the trouble. And by the way, no one else hears her when she's doing it. So
Yeah.
if the tree falls in a forest and there's nobody there, yeah, kind of
Plus,
deal.
she was a lovely human and, she was always delightfully kind to me. So, you know,
It sounds like it was a loving nickname,
it was.
that term of endearment, as they would say.
Yes.
And there's also something else that's kind of neat about your name too. There's a lot of different ways to spell Catherine. I
There
can
is.
think of relatives that I have, and there's at least 4 different ways that I'm aware of. And how do you spell your Catherine?
My Catherine is actually spelled with a K at the beginning, which C is more common, and an A in the middle, which is very unusual.
Right.
So it's Katharine. And even people that have known me for a very long time still frequently misspell it.
Yep.
And
It's fun.
actually, Google likes to correct me when I spell it, which is very annoying. It's
I
like,
feel
that's
your
not a
pain.
spell check.
Yeah, there are some things where, it would be nice if we just sort of leave it alone. Do you ever
Yes,
have that thing where you, like, hit the send button, but and then it changes it, like, in an instant?
absolutely. Super frustrating. And interestingly enough, back when you would fill out like paper applications for credit card, like a store charge or something, um, I would spell it correctly on the application and they would fix it when they sent me the card.
No kidding.
So yes, I had multiple store charges when I was younger that literally had my name misspelled.
It's amazing.
So, but I will say I've missed my calling apparently because there are 3 very famous Hollywood actresses that spell their name the same way: Katharine Hepburn, Katharine Graham, and Katharine Ross.
So, what I like about what you just said was one of them I actually had lunch with.
Oh,
Yes,
really? How cool.
guess which one it might have been?
Well, I'm hoping it was Katharine Hepburn just because she's my favorite of the 3, but who?
Ding, 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 ding. Tell her what she's won, Johnny. So it actually was. I went to a restaurant that the two of us frequented at different times. And at one point, she and I were the only two people, other than the servers and the bartender, that were in this really nice restaurant. So, of course, being who I am, I had to go over and ask her if it would be okay if I could ask her a few questions, and would she like to, you know, share the table, either mine or hers? And she said, "Well, of course you can sit down."
Oh, how
Yeah, I
lovely.
know. Yeah.
That means
So
she's as lovely in person as I thought she was,
better.
which isn't always true of famous people.
No, she was, and I think one of her quotes is that there's only one way to be, and that's who you are everywhere you are. She's got dozens and dozens of famous quotes out there, but that's one of the ones that I don't know anybody that ever wrote a bad line about her. Maybe I don't get out enough, but she was one of those lovable people that you just really had to appreciate who they were.
Well,
So
I believe if I'm right, Catherine, actually, the name meaning is pure heart. And it sounds like she was living up to her name.
that's really cool. I've met a couple of Catherine files, O files, in
Mhm.
the last week. Another gal that I met, last week said that her family knew the Hepburn family
Wow.
when back before she was born, and
Mhm.
so her grandfather went to school with Catherine Hepburn's father.
Talk about a small world.
Too small sometimes. And wouldn't it be cool if we could just like hear all of those neat stories and get everybody in the room at the same time and just talk back and forth? What do you got? What do you got? I don't know. Spencer Tracy. Oh, that's a big one. Yeah.
Plus, yes, the world can be strangely small at times, but it just, for me, always shows us how connected we all are as humans. A lot of times we focus on the ways we're not connected or disagree. And moments like this, it's like, no, it is a small world, and we do have all these connections and commonalities.
Yes. And what's really interesting, back in the 70s or 80s, I want to say there was a book that was written about the 6 degrees of separation, right?
Mhm.
That you and I could be introduced to somebody who could introduce us to somebody who could and so forth, no more than 6 people away from us. I think it's even shorter now with social media and all the rest of that sort of thing. And you'd be surprised, how open, and the neat thing about meeting somebody of Catherine's stature was
Mhm.
that she never had an inflated view of herself. She
Yeah.
always appreciated getting work, and she always appreciated who she worked with.
Which is just a lovely viewpoint.
Yeah. And one of my favorite movies was Baby. Do you know
Oh,
that movie?
really? I do, but I haven't seen it in a very long time.
Yes, Cary Grant and Katharine with their
Mhm.
pet panther.
My dad and I used to stay up late watching old movies sometimes, so when I was younger.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps. So we'll move on to a legitimate question here because I have a feeling we could probably talk about your middle or your oh, did I say middle name?
You
I don't know what
did.
it is.
I see what you did there, Belle.
Twicky Twicky interviewer. All right. So when did you first notice what color hair you had? Cat?
Wow. I'm not sure I fully know first notice, but what came comes to mind when you ask the question is when my hair started to change color.
Okay.
So I was actually a blonde, not just as a baby, but I had blonde hair even, starting to grow up. And when I even started elementary school, my hair was still blonde. But my school picture for kindergarten, I still had long blonde hair. And my first grade picture, I had brown hair. And
Very
so I think when I became really aware was when it was making that transition from blonde to brown. Naturally, that was not hair color.
That's funny. And then after that, did it kinda summer blonde on you or lighten up with highlights and whatnot, or
My hair has a mind of its own. Um, Sometimes during the summer, it would get really light. You would see a lot of golden highlights. Sometimes it wouldn't. It still does not stabilize, and I know a lot of women color their hair, and I have had periods of my life where I did as well. Not currently in one of those phases, but I notice it just sometimes decides to change color, or it will look a different color right after a haircut. If it's a different hairstyle, it will appear to be variant shades in the brown family. I haven't gone back to blonde since I was in first grade, but yeah, it has a mind of its own.
that's really cool. And I think the neat part of it is that it's so clear where your demarcation was. This school picture, I've got blonde hair. This school picture, it's brunette.
Yep.
It's documented as if you knew you were going to be on this podcast one of these days.
Exactly, and I will not say how many years ago kindergarten and first grade was, but let's just say it was a very long time ago. So apparently, I have been preparing for this conversation with you for a very long time.
You were born for it. I can definitely see that. So, on to the next question. What is your favorite thing to do to intentionally waste time?
Oh, sit outside in nature.
Mhm.
Um, I live in Texas now, so sitting outside is not always possible because it gets really hot here during the summer. But sometimes, because I do work from home, sometimes I just like, I know I have things to do, but I will go and just sit out in the sunshine and listen to the wind and the birds and watch for butterflies fluttering around just outside in nature. And I used to live in Southern California. And one of the things I appreciated most was I had a gorgeous backyard with lots of flowers. I had a couple of hummingbirds that lived, they must have had a nest somewhere either in my yard or close by, but they would literally come if I was sitting very still outside and they would fly right in front of my face, like a foot or so away, as if they were saying good morning or good day to me. And it was just, and I had lizards out there that would just come and hang out. I trained my dog at the time not to chase the lizards. Um, and we would just be sitting there and the lizards would come over and check us out. And yeah, that's my favorite way to just, I say waste time, but it's very rejuvenating, but it is kind of the wasting time, not being productive, which our society values so much. And the eclipse was a great day for that. I was on the path of totality. So I literally just sat in my backyard for like 3 hours. Yes, it was a work day, but the advantage of owning your own business is you can kinda choose to take 3 hours in the middle of the day to just be in awe of the wonder of a total eclipse. So,
Yeah, and quite frankly, I heard the rain date for that eclipse was 2097, so I it's probably that you got it under your I've sat through 2, total eclipses in my
yeah.
life, but
Well,
it's
interestingly, in Fort Worth, the next total eclipse date in that we would be on the path of totality is the year 2345, so over 300 years from now. And yes, I know science and technology keeps doing wondrous things, but I don't plan to be alive in that year. So this was it. This was my shot.
yeah, exactly. 2, 3, 4, 5. How cool is that? If you're
I know.
into numerology, that would be like how many descendants from carry the 3? It's a long time.
It's
Yeah.
a long time.
So I agree with you. I think whenever you can be mindful and present, it's not going to be wasting time. It's just going to notice that a lot of time went by while you were having fun, you know?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's a really cool thing is to lose yourself in a moment because you're so present.
Sort of like good books. I lose myself in books too. I
Yeah.
read a lot of nonfiction, less likely to lose myself in those books, but, just reading a well-written memoir or non or fiction book or just well-crafted story is
Mm.
another one of those moments where all of a sudden you look up and it's been hours that you've been sitting there reading. So,
Yes, I part of my coaching is to, get people in the space where they can do that.
mhm,
'Cause most people have, short little attention spans and really are not they can hardly stand the sound of their own voice in their head, you know what I mean?
yes. I'm
So
familiar with that.
okay, but when you can engage in something that takes your full attention to be present to, and then suddenly 2 or 3 hours have gone by, it's really the best. I
Yes.
agree with you, and I wouldn't call that wasting time either, it's got another name. We'll coin a different word, maybe something that rhymes with your middle name.
That might be a challenge.
Oh, oh, really? So, what is your favorite movie, Cat, to watch all by yourself?
Favorite is such a difficult thing to answer because I love watching movies, and I am equally at home watching movies by myself or with friends, but it would probably be one of the Disney movies. And you said watching by myself, so I think I would probably pick The Princess and the Frog, but
Princess,
it's really, really hard because there's lots of movies I really love and watch over and over again.
yeah. So what would be another one? Just out of curiosity.
Um, Under the Tuscan Sun is one that I watch a lot when I'm by myself and just need to really reconnect.
That's very cool. What is it about that movie that really gets you?
I love the storyline. I loved her sense of discovering who she was
Yeah,
because she had had a major life change. For people that don't know the storyline, it's about a writer who is recently divorced that through a series of very random seeming events ends up restoring a home in Tuscany. And just like she thinks she's not getting everything she wants. And spoiler alert, at the end, somebody reflects back to her that, you said these were the things you wanted. And he points out how she got them all, but she got them in ways that weren't what matched the picture in her head.
right.
And I think that's one of the things a lot of us miss is we expect our dreams or our prayers to be answered in a very specific way, and we sometimes miss the glory of how they got answered
Yeah.
because it doesn't look exactly like what we thought it would. So, and the scenery is gorgeous. I have been to Italy, never to Tuscany, but it is on the bucket list. And the house that they filmed it in is actually on, like, it's a rental. You can actually go stay in Brembisele. Um, so yeah,
Good for
like
you. It's,
that's
you
on the
know,
bucket list. I would love to do
all
that
worked
sometime.
out. Tuscany is on my bucket list as well, but I don't have a specific destination there. I would probably just be really happy to go someplace in wine country, uh,
Mhm,
where the rolling hills are and those 40 and 50-foot cypress trees, from the Da Vinci paintings and all that sort of
mhm.
thing, right?
Yep.
And the other part of it is just to eat really, really fresh cheese and fresh bread and maybe not so fresh wine, but you could definitely.
Wine is generally better not fresh. I
Unless it's
think
a
fresh, it's actually called grape juice.
yeah, there has been, but are you familiar with Beaujolais from France?
A little bit. I know it's a very young wine. My dad was more into reds than I am, but
Yeah. Well, back in the 1980s, was a group of us at a company that I worked at where we actually got these bottles that were less than 5 days old that were flown over on the Concorde.
wow.
That was quite a job. And then the
I
wine was not for me, okay, but I did get some of it. It
mhm,
was to impress, some pretty important clients.
uh-huh.
And the story is almost as impressive as the wine. I didn't think there was really all that much about the wine that was worth talking about, to be honest with you.
But it's the experience, and that's one of the things it's these moments in time that just stick with us.
Absolutely. And putting yourself in a position where you get an opportunity to have a transformational experience because once you've tasted a Beaujolais wine, you'll never not know what it tastes like. I
Mhm,
mean, now it's 40 years later and I can still taste it.
mhm.
So,
That's very cool.
yeah, and it's all part of the mindfulness thing. We didn't call it mindfulness back in those days. We called it paying attention, you know? Like there was a right way to pay attention. So, pay attention to this question.
Okay.
If you were to have an action figure made of you, what superpower would it have, and what colors would its uniform be, and what would its middle name be?
I saw you how you snuck that in. I'm gonna do the colors first because
Sure.
I immediately got a visual of an action figure of me, and it would be like a deep purple and a silver metallic.
Mm.
Those would be my colors. There's a lot of really good superpowers, but I think I would like my superpower to be and I have 2 because 'cause they're related.
Oh, yeah, no, you can have as many as you want to. I
Okay,
wanna hear
so,
you talk
like,
about
my
them.
primary superpower would be empathy and being able to detect when people's hearts or the invisible things are broken or need healing, and the secondary superpower would be to be able to help them heal because, I mean, there's a lot of obvious things in the world that are broken. Like if you, I don't know, have a skiing accident and break a limb, that's obvious. But so many people I meet are hurting in ways that aren't visible.
Yeah.
And it could be an invisible disease, because there are plenty of those, or it could be something just happened in their life and nobody knows. And they're suffering in silence or they're grieving in silence. And just to have somebody be able to a superhero come and be able to pick up on that and help them through that, help them heal. Like, I think that would be the ultimate superpower. Not that flying wouldn't also be cool, but I'm kind of afraid of heights, so I don't think I would want that to be my superpower.
Well, that's one way of getting over your fear of heights in a real short order.
I maybe.
So clearly, you would be an amazingly wonderful and very special superhero. And that whole notion of empathy and being able to, hear what's not being said. And quite frankly, there are a lot of people that have upset in their life that they've forgotten why they are.
Mhm.
Not
Also
every
true.
Yeah, I mean, and they say trauma is lives in your body for the rest of your life. It's just a matter of whether it's gonna be at the front or if it's gonna be in the back or if it's going to be something that kinda throws you and gives you an emotional reaction, or it's something that you're now used to, and when it comes up, it's go, "Oh, there it is again."
I actually had that experience many years ago in my 20s with a therapist where she uncovered something that I had just blocked so deeply
Yep,
that I literally asked her, like, could I be making we were using a therapeutic technique similar to hypnosis, and I was like, "Could I have made that up?" Like, I literally did not remember the inciting incident,
yeah.
um, but it was still affecting me. That's why, like, being able to see those hidden hurts and feel them and sense them is so powerful because if you don't know it's there, you can't heal it, you can't fix it, you can't come to terms with it. So,
Yeah, and sometimes it's really, really empowering for somebody else to just get it?
yeah.
It's like, I don't know what it is about you, but I really get how deep it is. I really get how interesting it can be, and at the same time, you're okay, you know? And you don't and when you're not okay, that's okay too, you know? So, yeah, I get it. So, the uniform colors, are
We're
the
purple and silver,
right,
but, like,
and so I was
deep.
gonna say, is that something that you've liked for a long time? And, like, of course, that would be the combination?
Purple has been although I love it's sorta like movies, having a favorite color is hard for me because I like so many colors, but purple has been a favorite color for at least back since elementary school.
Yep.
I was never a pink girl. As a matter of fact, for a long time, I disliked pink intensely. Um, Pink and I have made up, and we are now friends, and she belongs in my wardrobe now too. But
You can at
um,
least tolerate each other now, huh?
no, we're actual friends.
Oh,
Um,
good.
I have actually I still remember when my ex-husband came to visit me several years after we had ended our marriage. And he was surprised because I was wearing hot pink. And he's like, "You don't like pink." And I was like, "Well, I do now." But purple has always been like, if not number 1, always like tied for number 1. Um, so it doesn't surprise me. And even my company logo has a purple in it. A new thing I'm doing that's a passion project, part of its color palette is also purple. So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Plus, purple for me, when you think about the superpowers too, purple has a deep connection to spirituality, a deep connection to the divine or royalty. Um, so, having that piece of it too. And I just literally when you ask the question, like, the purple and silver just put itself together in my brain. So,
Mar
um, it was just probably because it needs something a little flashy. You know, we gotta have a metallic in there somewhere. Um, but also I really think the 2 colors go nicely together. I know a lot of schools and stuff use purple and gold, but I actually like purple and silver better.
perfect. So now, what did you wanna grow up to be when you were 5 years old?
A lawyer.
Say some more.
I had my first Harvard Law T-shirt when I was 5. Um, yeah, I a friend of my family, like, they had a little girl about my same age, was a lawyer that had gone to Harvard, and I grew up in the Boston area. My grandmother actually lived in Cambridge, not too far from Harvard, so there was, like, proximity to Harvard as well. But yeah, I wanted to grow up and be a lawyer. And as I continued to grow up, that refined itself to wanting to be an intellectual property attorney. First a corporate attorney, then an intellectual property specialization. Had my whole life planned out around that was what I was going to be when I grew up. And life is what happens when you're making other plans. So
Exactly.
the plan got derailed after my MBA, and I didn't end up making it to law school, but I still have a deep passion for protecting people's ideas, and that our creative spirit deserves to be protected. So even when I'm working with like my own clients or friends or whatever, and they have this great idea or a great name for something, I'm like, you should take steps to protect it. Um, Even when um, before they had sites where you would actually like the free sites for images, um, co- uh, like deposit photos or things like that.
Sure.
The I would get so frustrated because some of my friends are just amazing photographers when people didn't understand. I think there's much more understanding now, but they didn't understand that just because they could find and save an image on the internet didn't make it theirs.
Right.
And so it's still something that like I try to be really protective in my own use of either quotes or things like that, but just that's our uniqueness, our special gift to the world is the things we creatively produce, and
Yes.
that should be protected. We should get credit for the things we that God birthed into the world through us. So, I still have a passion for intellectual property, even though that was not what I ended up doing at all.
Well, it's wonderful to me that not only did you say something that's kind of a famous quote that I'm aware of, and then you went on to talk about how, all the other things around intellectual property and protecting and all. So the what you said was, I believe, uh, life is while you're busy doing other things or busy
Life
doing.
is what happens when you're making other plans.
Yes, and do you know where that came from?
I do not know the original source, so please educate me.
I will give you a place to go take a look at.
Okay.
There's this man named John Lennon.
Okay.
He wrote
I
a
know who.
song. Yeah, he wrote a song for Sean Lennon, his number 2 son, called
Okay.
"Beautiful, Beautiful Boy."
Okay. And it's in there?
It's in the lyrics, yes.
Hey, I did
Like
not realize that was the origin. I have heard it as a colloquialism forever. Um,
I think the language he uses in the lyrics is, "Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans."
I will definitely go look that up when we are
And
done.
I would almost guarantee he stole it from somewhere. However, it was kind of cool to me because I had heard it out and about, and then I was listening to "Beautiful Boy" one afternoon about 10, 15 years ago, and son of a gun, I never realized that was a John Lennon quote, you know?
I didn't either, and there's so many things, like, um Nelson Mandela gets credit for something that actually Marianne Williamson originally said. So
Really?
also kind of digging into, yeah, that our deepest fear is not that we are powerful. I mean, that our deepest sorry.
It's okay.
Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, it is that we are powerful beyond measure, I believe is the I don't have it up in front of me because we're just having a conversation, I believe is the start of it, but it was actually, a lot of people attributed it to Nelson Mandela, but it was actually from a Marianne Williamson, book originally, so
That's fantastic.
or maybe it's Our Greatest Fear. Anyway, people can look up the actual quote, but it was when I always thought it was Nelson Mandela too, because I had heard that. I had
Yeah.
seen it, on social media and stuff. And then I was grateful because somebody pointed out to me one time, no, actually, this is the original source. And I went and looked it up, and that was indeed where it was. So it's hard because we get used to things in conversation and we just assume it's true.
Well, yeah, because I mean, we've got a penchant where it's good to know things, right?
Yep.
And the truth will set you free, but first it'll probably tick you off, you know. So when and I mean, who wouldn't want to give Nelson Mandela credit for cool
Yeah.
stuff?
Well, and I mean, he did make a lot of famous speeches.
Yeah,
So,
a lot of
uh,
wrote a lot of letters too, like the apostles.
yes, he did. So, anyway, it's just one of those things where I'm grateful that you pointed out that you think it was in the song lyrics. I was never a huge Beatles, John Lennon person, but I'm sure I've heard the song probably along the way.
Yeah, it's in the album. I want to say that that recorded himself after the Beatles broke up, when two of the Beatles were still performing on the album, Ringo Starr and George Harrison.
Okay.
So, uh, so I would point you in that direction, and then you can get a T-shirt made with it on it, right?
Something like that.
Well, and listen to it and hear the melody because that's kind of cool too.
Mhm. Okay, cool.
So, a lawyer from age 5, and so what happened? Because you're not a lawyer, right?
I am not a lawyer. I God had other plans for me, actually, I think is what it mostly was. Um, because I got my first opportunity in the field that I actually stayed in to do something in that field when I was 18 years old for a friend of my dad's. Um, and I kept getting jobs or internships and things like that along the way in the field of marketing. And so my plan was to do my MBA in international management and then go on to law school. Because again, I wanted to do intellectual property, which protecting things internationally is more complicated than just filing in the US. Hence the international management MBA. And I got married right after I finished my graduate degree.
Yep.
And when I let my new husband at that time know that I was still planning to go to law school and that I wanted to go to law school at Harvard because I had wanted to go to Harvard since I was little, um, he wasn't so thrilled about that plan
Right.
because we did not live in Massachusetts. And so it just didn't happen. I prioritized my marriage and never made it to law school, but I really do think it was where I was supposed to be because I've stayed in the field of marketing. Again, my first marketing job was when I was 18 years old, and that was many, many years ago.
Yeah, sometimes there's happy accidents, aren't there?
There is, and it uses a lot of my kind of innate talents in a way that I'm not sure being a intellectual property lawyer would have used those, so
I have a feeling you would have been really good at it, probably good at anything that you do, but in the meantime, selfishly, I'm awfully glad you decided not to go to law school because here you are.
because here I am. Although, Bill, we might have been destined to meet anyway, so who knows?
Exactly. I
Some
will
people are destined to be in our lives and our paths are destined to cross regardless of circumstances, so
I
we
like
still
that
might be having this conversation.
100%. We are having this conversation, aren't we? So
Exactly.
as I'm concerned, everything that you say is 100% true. I mean, you've never lied to me, so why start now, you know?
Exactly.
Exactly. So here we are. Now here's something that I think is gonna be okay. What is your greatest accomplishment, Kat?
That I guess I think my greatest accomplishment is the relationships I've built with people. Especially, I mean, I can think of work ones and, I did some really cool things throughout my career, but really being willing to really create and work on relationships with the people most important to me. Most importantly, probably is my relationship with my dad. And even though I didn't think it was a big deal
Yeah.
because it didn't occur to me to behave differently, I've had enough people reflect back to me that during his journey with his dementia, like there just wasn't a choice. I was going to be there. I was his person. Um, one could argue I was the only remaining member of his family, so part of it was just I was the person.
Yeah.
But even during his final year, I made a lot of choices to not do things that would have been in my best interest. Um, I did less on my business um, in terms of, business development and things like that. Still took care of clients, but I made choices so that I could spend more time with him. I could be there to help him with things. And I was there during his not so delightful final hours. So yeah, being a good daughter to my dad. I think that's my greatest accomplishment. I'm trying to be a good daughter to my mom too, but like, yeah, I think that's my greatest accomplishment
Good
is
for you.
being Bob's daughter.
Yes. Yes, Bob's daughter. There's something to be said for being Bob's daughter and, and then blossoming and growing like a weed. It's perfect. So who is your favorite person to listen to?
Favorite person to listen to? Oh, again, like you ask these tough questions. Um,
Oh, I stayed up all night doing these.
because favorite is one of those like technically you're only supposed to have one favorite. And it's really hard to pick one.
Well, you
Uh,
know what? Let's keep it under 5, okay?
okay. So my dad was one of my favorite people. He is no longer with us, but he was definitely one of my favorite people to listen to because he always had such wisdom. Um, he had a really great view of life and the world. He was kind of philosopher in his approach to things. So he would definitely be up there. I have a couple of preachers that I really enjoy listening to. One of them is Ron Carpenter. He actually has a church on both coasts. So he has one in South Carolina and one in Northern California. But I really appreciate the way he preaches and the way he connects the word of God to like life and present day and really creates a way for you to think differently.
Right,
Um, and that's actually one of the things that when I think of all the people I really enjoy listening to, if you're not talking musical artists, which is a whole separate category, it's people that have a unique viewpoint and are really smart And it doesn't necessarily mean smart like high IQ, but just they connect dots. Their smarts may be street smarts or life smarts, not book smarts, but they just have this really unique viewpoint that makes me think more because I really appreciate people that make me look at life differently, show me different viewpoints that I might not have considered, um, but in a way that they're not creating controversy just to create controversy. They're kind
Yes,
in their way of presenting. So it's not about making others wrong, but they have very strong viewpoints as well. Does that make sense?
makes all the sense in the world. Anyone, and there's far too much of it. It turns out just to be noise. People that throw something out that's totally confronting, and they're doing it just to get a reaction and a rise. And it's a cheap trick. Okay, it's far more interesting to listen to somebody who can communicate a basic human function, or some experience that we all have separately, and we're not sure that other people have it. And that aha moment when it's a common thing between us, it turns out,
Yeah. And just being willing to have, like, openness even in strong opinions.
Yeah.
So but to your point, you and I are of a certain age. So, remember, like, when
So
shock
cute.
radio
Putting
first
yourself in my group. I love you.
remember when shock radio was first, like, a thing?
Absolutely.
And it was just that, like, it wasn't good radio, it was just designed to shock and
Right.
get reaction, and I think the people that I most enjoy listening to have strong opinions, some of which may be shocking in the sense they don't fit how my view of the world is,
Right.
and yet they're not trying to just shock for the sake of shock.
100%. And if there is any shock going on, it's to make a point for
Yeah,
now. Not to draw attention to themselves, but
yeah,
just to drive a point home.
yeah, so and
Is
on
there
a
anyone in particular you can think of that you would point to, that would fill that bill?
Um, well, some of one of my business mentors, he's not my favorite person to listen to, although I do like listen to him a lot, is Pedro Adeo. And he speaks on yeah, some marketing topics, some finance topics. Has a group that's about kingdom entrepreneurship. But some of what he says is it's harsh, but not unkind.
Yeah.
He points out problems in our worldview around the financial industry. He came out of that world, like insurance and things like that. And there's a lot of deception around what is shared with the general public trying to make decisions. So he's very harsh and says some things that are kind of shocking. But one, they're truth backed, but he's being shocking and he says them in a way to get you to stop and listen long enough to start thinking and investigating on your own,
Yes.
because that's really what he's trying to get us to do is to actually open our eyes to something that might be hidden from us. And he does it with a lot of fiery passion. His um, family of origin is from Portugal, so he has like this fiery, passion to him when he talks about some of these topics. And some people, if they're not listening, they're like, "Oh, that wasn't very nice," but it was still kind, which is another kind of important. Like, if you're going to be shocking or you're going to call an industry or a person out on something, still having that done in a way that's kind, even if the words don't sound nice. So he's one who comes to mind when you ask that question.
Terrific. Very
And I had
clear.
to pick somebody that people could actually, like, find. I have people in my life that are also like that, but somebody that people could find on the internet as examples.
Terrific. So, will you please complete this sentence? When I grow up, I'd like to.
Not grow up. Um,
Doing with that.
I don't know. There's a certain amount of Peter Pan in me. What when I grow up, because I grew up very fast as a child
Yes.
and then kind of recaptured that, childlike wonder, and once I finally recaptured it, I really actually didn't I don't wanna lose that again. Like, if growing up means that I can't go to a place like Disney World and get lost in the fun and wonder and the characters and, you know, have conversation, like, literally Princess Tiana, I mentioned Princess and the Frog earlier. Princess Tiana is my favorite Disney princess, which is hard to pick, but she is
There
my favorite
are a
Disney.
mess of them, aren't there?
There are, and it was Belle because she's a bookworm, and I can really appreciate that about her, and she's very kind to somebody that was an outcast to the world and to others. But I love Princess Tiana, and literally when I meet her in the parks, like, we sit there and talk about in entrepreneurship and family values and carrying on family legacy, which, yes, I am a rational adult. I understand how those work in case you have children listening. Not
Yep.
going to say more than that, but, like, I love being able to approach the world with that childlike curiosity and wonder, or, the miracle of butterflies fluttering in the yard, or, like, I don't yeah, if growing up means I have to lose that, no, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna root for you staying as childlike in your nature as possible. And there have been some people, including Catherine, that we talked about, who that was a major part of her deal too. To always have the awe of everything that goes on in the world, through the innocence and the wonder of a child's eyes and imagination. And so you mentioned going to Disney. Um, Again, I have no idea how old you are, and I'm not gonna ask you, for a number, but did you go to Disney World back when Journey to Imagination was still there, when it was a
Mhm.
ride?
Yep.
My favorite ever.
I do love that ride, although my favorite ride at Walt Disney World, well, I really love Expedition Everest. It's my favorite roller coaster of any roller coaster I've ever ridden. But my favorite ride is actually in the land pavilion,
Right.
because I love taking that slow boat ride through the greenhouse. I've done the behind the scenes tour a bunch of times
Sure.
and seeing, like, the hydroponics and all the greenery and the flowers and the veggies, and so that is, like, because Disney is one of my favorite places, and also I am 99th percentile introvert on Myers-Briggs, so I get exhausted around being around people, and Disney is known for having a lot of people. So that's, like, my escape ride. I can go sit on that boat. First of all, usually there's not a super long line for it, but and just sit there and see the plants and just appreciate that moment of stillness
Yeah.
and quiet. So that's my favorite, but Journey into the Imagination is also a very fun ride when it was there. It's not
Yeah.
there.
Well, it broke my heart when they, mothballed it. I
Yeah.
was hoping that someone would buy it and put it up somewhere else in
Mhm.
another theme park, but the song, Figment flying around, that, the dream catcher, there just was so much going on there that was so it it kinda put into an experience in 5 or 10 minutes what I would want every human being to go through in terms of creating that curiosity.
Mhm.
Having a curious mind, and being able to come up with better questions where we're thrown to having answers, you know? The answers close down the inquiry. So forget the answers, they're not important. It's what's the next question after you get that answer, you know what I mean? And that childlike, view of imagination and the song too. I mean, you can hear it in your head, I can hear it in mine. Thank me for it, you'll be listening to it the rest of the day.
Yeah. Well, at least you picked that and not It's a Small World.
Oh my god. They're not too far apart melodically, but,
True,
anyway,
but yes, they're both earworms.
yes, they are, and they're and who would wanna shake it? I mean, seriously, it's okay, we'll leave it there, okay? So, what is the most important thing in life to you right now?
The most important thing in life to me right now is actually my faith. I mean, I love my dog, my mom's important, friends are important, but actually the most important thing to me right now is my faith. And I mean, it's always been super important, but what I found in the last few years, I went on my first missions trip a few years ago. Um, Walking out my dad's journey with him required a lot of leaning on my faith, but just like there's a hunger inside me that is has been amplified in the last few years. And as I said, part of it I think was my first missions trip, part of it was the journey with my dad, but it's just ignited a deeper craving for connection to God, my faith, and also community around that faith. Um, yeah, that's the most important to me right now.
Very
Although
clear.
my dog is really, really cute, so I will say he's like a pretty close second, but
Her kids have a special partner. I mean,
they
they're family and they're nice to have around, aren't they?
they are. Besides, dog is God spells backwards, so, there's that.
100%. 100%. So, Catherine, what would you like to leave in the world after your life is done?
I would love if even if it's just one person, if there's a spark of the curiosity, there's a spark of the faith, there's a spark of the kindness that I try to show up in, if I can pass that on. I don't have children, um, so I don't have that kind of legacy, but if I hope this is all of our dreams, like, that when we leave this world, it's a better place for us having been in it,
Yeah,
and, some people, like Mother Teresa, leave a lot of impact and huge ripple effects.
yeah,
But we don't all have to be that way. It can start with just the person in front of us. You know, I have had the privilege of being around somebody that was contemplating ending their life before and being able to be there in that moment
right.
and just be there for them. And that's not about me, that totally God thing, that I just happen to be in the right place at the right time, ask the right questions.
Yep,
But that person, and it was a long time ago, so who knows that, they could be married, they could have kids, but it's that butterfly effect, that one opportunity for us to impact the world in a positive way that could have huge consequences that we don't even know about.
Yeah.
And I used to get real wrapped up in, well, I can never make a huge impact because I'm not a politician. I'm not, a saint. I'm not like, I don't have a big stage, a big platform. But then I realized it's the little things. Like if I make somebody's day brighter because we're having this conversation, if something I say to somebody sparks an interest in spending more time outside, which there's lots of science behind, like time in nature actually helps our nervous system. And the more stress we are, the more disease we're prone to, but the less stress and nature can take out stress. Like it could just be that simple. But that's what I'm hoping to leave behind. Nobody has to remember my name. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
But if 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 I can make those types of impacts every once in a while, that would be my life would be very happy.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. I believe you do that.
Thank you.
You
I
certainly
try.
do that. You do that with me. I can tell you
Oh,
that right now. It's marvelous spending time with you.
same,
So,
Bill. You do that for me as well. I
well,
love our conversations.
but see, that's really the cool thing, and also from scriptures, from Isaiah, if I remember correctly, you can't tell who's giving and who's receiving. And that's where we get to experience life working. No need to keep track or keep score, or no need to balance accounts. But yes, you're quite a gal, and I appreciate the time that we spent getting to know each other very quickly over the last couple of days. That's my editorial. Um, so now everybody who goes to a baker knows that there's something special. If you buy a dozen of anything, you get a 13th for free.
Oh, do we get a bonus?
This is your baker's question. Are you ready?
I love cupcakes, so yes. I love
Okay.
baker's dozens.
All right. So, what is the thing that most people misunderstand about you?
Okay, I'm gonna give you 2 answers again because I can't decide which is the most. One thing that used to get frequently misunderstood about me is I'm I'm great because you and I are one-on-one, but if you were to put me into a party, because this happens much more in social settings than, like, business networking, I get very quiet. People have perceived me as standoffish. And it's really just I am so overwhelmed because even though it's not superhero level, I am very empathic. So I pick up a lot. So when I'm in bigger crowds, I get very withdrawn, I get quiet. And so people perceive that as being stuck up, or I don't want to talk to people, I don't want to mingle. And it's really just that I'm overwhelmed. But the other piece of feedback that I've gotten that made me feel like I people misunderstand. I really try to find the good in people,
Yeah.
and especially when I was in corporate, I don't get this feedback as much when now that I'm on my own and I hang out with other entrepreneurs mostly. But in corporate, like I would go out of my way to point out when somebody did a good job or something like that. And everybody's like, oh, you're just sucking up, or like they thought there was some ulterior motive.
Right.
And I mean, I guess there is in the sense that I didn't get a lot of positive reinforcement, especially growing up. And it doesn't take any extra effort really when somebody like if one of the administrative people booked my travel reservations, it doesn't take any extra effort to say, I really appreciate that not only did you book it, but you worked really hard to make sure I'm on a flight where I can have an aisle seat because I get claustrophobic. being, again, too many people around me. Like, I like the aisle seat. So going that extra mile to make sure it was a flight that had an open, like, it doesn't take any extra effort or time, but I would get the feedback a lot like, "Oh, you're such a suck up," or "You're brown nosing," or, and it's like, "No, I'm just taking a moment to express," because we all get the negative feedback,
with
you
impunity.
know? Everybody's more than willing to tell you everything you do wrong. So, yeah, I think that gets misunderstood about me a lot, that it's like some sort of, like, it's fake when I'm complimenting somebody, and it's like, no, I'm looking for a reason to give them a compliment.
That's quite a thing to be misunderstood about. I think that kind of demonstrates how unique that behavior is, such that people would be skeptical about hearing about it from somebody. But I'm sure getting to know you for a little while that people will start to see that's just who you are.
Well, it's it's not even just about me. Like, think about news.
Right.
The majority of the news cycle is people doing bad things, negative things, hate, conflict. So we've culturally come to expect the negative.
Yep.
And even if you think about, like, if the news led off with a positive story instead of like burying the good news stuff at the end in little segments,
Yes.
people would probably complain about that and say, "Hey, what's going on? Like, what happened to my news program?" And I think it's just culturally, we've been indoctrinated to expect the negative. So when we see the positive, it feels like something must be fishy about it. And like one of my friends, um, her name's Tamika Taylor, and her kind of tagline is "Love you, mean it." I mean it. And I love that about her because it's totally genuine, but I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think it's just like a marketing ploy or something like that, because she uses it a lot in her social media, and it's like, no, if you spent 5 minutes with Tamika, you would absolutely know she really does mean it. She's another person that just constantly reminds me and inspires me to look for the best in people, and because she does it.
Yeah.
So I just think if all of us surrounded ourselves with more people like that, maybe it would be contagious, and
That's my
it would
hope.
it would catch on as much as our negative news cycles and things like that. In fairness, maybe news has changed. I haven't actually watched the news deliberately for probably 25 years or more. I
Well,
stopped
I
watching.
think you may be a little optimistic. Some would say it's gotten far worse. So all of that said, you and I, we're close enough to being of a certain age when we used to have, the experience every evening of someone sitting and reading to us what happened that day, not trying to tell us what it meant or what we
Yeah.
don't know about it that's really going on and all the nonsense. There's just far too many people making money by giving opinions that don't matter, and in many cases they're like that person that's just trying to shock.
Or they're just not, like, journalism back in, like, the Walter Cronkite days, um, like, it was well researched, and that's not necessarily a negative on the journalists today. I think our news cycle has just become so fast. I mean, when you think about the news in the style you're describing, there was, evening news. So they had a full 24-hour, maybe not a full 24 hours because it might have happened in the afternoon, but they had time to go research and get diverse pieces of information so that they were reporting in a more balanced way.
Yeah.
And I think part of what's gotten off track with news. And again, full disclosure, I probably shouldn't even be commenting on the news since I don't watch it. But what I feel like might have happened is just because of this instant speed, it's all so rushed and hurried that even journalists that really want to give those balanced viewpoints are under pressure to give them so fast that they are more opinions than
Yeah,
facts.
I completely agree with you, and we're at a point where accuracy is not necessary anymore.
Yeah.
But it's a feelings kind of a thing, you know, and that's dangerous more than anything else in the world. You know, people want to be able to trust and mention Walter Cronkite. I think an average of 60 to 70 million people a night tuned him in. Okay, the big share getters are getting a million. Okay, and we've tripled our well, we're at least 50% more population than when I was a kid. At about
Mhm.
200 million then. We've people we don't know on the upper end, but there are people who think that we've got close to 350, 360 million. 1 million tunes in, and that's enough to keep a show on the air.
Yeah.
There's money. The money that's involved there has a lot more to do with the interest in educating, or the interest in informing, or being a professional. Means something different today, I think.
I think it has gotten that way. Just makes my heart sad.
However, you just keep
Mm.
being authentically grateful, and keep your moral compass the direction that it's going. You'll be fine, I say.
I try. I try each and every day, some days more successfully than others.
You are
Yeah,
you're
some days
remarkable.
more successfully than others, but it's something I aspire to.
I like knowing that about you, which basically means that you're going to have to spend more time with me. You know that, right?
That would be my honor and privilege, Bill, because I was so grateful to Eric who introduced us because, like,
He's the
you're just
best,
a person that I'm supposed to have in my world.
apparently. And I feel the same. I really do. So, with that said, do you have any questions of me?
So are you gonna tell me what your middle name is?
I'll trade with you.
Oh, okay. I'll do the trade. Because somebody actually, interestingly enough, it's so funny that the middle name is like our final little thing. Um, it was just on a TV episode I was watching of something the other day.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like a very personal thing.
Yeah.
You actually get to know somebody when you actually know their middle name. Because when you think about it, well, maybe you're different because you asked this question. But a if you think about the people in your life, I bet you don't know the majority of their middle names.
Or how many of them are actually called by their middle name?
Also true. Although that's a little more obvious, I think, than the ones that just some of I legitimately have a couple people in my life that I know for a fact don't have a middle name. Um, but yeah, I can't tell you the middle name of even some of my close friends. Now I'm gonna have to go ask them, of course, but
And you know what? You'll work a deal with them, I'm sure.
probably.
So I
All
will
right,
go
Bill, so I'll
first
trade
in
you.
the pardon me?
I will trade you. I am a woman of my word.
Well, in the interest of fairness and goodwill, I will tell you that my middle name is Kenneth.
Oh, that's a nice middle name. I like
And
that.
and my father's name was William Eugene Correll, but growing up, he was Bill and I was Billy, and
Uh-huh.
everyone started calling me Junior, you know,
Yep.
but I wasn't a
But you're
junior.
not actually a junior.
I'm not a junior. I was named for my dad's best friend, William Kenneth Merrow.
Very cool. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
All right. So, in fairness, my middle name is Michelle.
That's a beautiful.
And the other little tidbit is my parents did not know what gender I was going to be. So they had a boy's name and a girl's name picked out, and it was going to be the same initials either way.
Right?
So if I had been a little boy instead of a girl, I would have been Kevin Michael instead of Catherine Michelle.
How about that? Now, I had a completely different take. I was expected to be a little girl. They had no
Interesting.
way of really knowing what the sexes were back in the
Yeah.
1950s. However, both of my parents were really hoping for a little girl, and my name would have been Linda Gwen. Gwen is my aunt, and at the time, she was my mother's best friend in the world.
Mhm.
Um, my sister Laura, when she came, her middle name became Gwen, but I'm not a Linda for some reason, and almost everybody else in the world was named Linda that year. So,
Well, I'm glad you're not a Linda. I had a professor in undergrad who taught history,
yep,
a male professor whose first name was June.
it's interesting.
And I can only imagine what it was like growing up for him.
Like a boy named Sue,
Like a boy named Sue, which actually was one of the things he joked on the first day of class
I'm
when I had
sure.
him about, like, the song, A Boy Named Sue. But yes, he was a boy named June, and great history professor. He actually worked for LBJ when he was a freshman senator. Like, he really knew history. We
Wow,
called it, Uncle June's Story Hour was the students' nickname for our American Civilization 1 and 2 with him. But yeah, because he would tell these rich stories about history. But all I could think of after he introduced himself with his first name was, "That must have been really challenging growing up." So, I am
well,
glad you were not a Linda, not because I have anything against the name. My stepmother was Linda, but just it would have made your life difficult.
we've all known a Carol or two also, a man named Carol, so
Yeah.
including Carol O'Connor, yeah,
Yes. So, our public service message to end this conversation is, please think through when you're naming your children how other children are going to react.
yep,
And also pick names like they used to do back in ancient times and give your kids a strong name. One of
something
my
you don't
friends
live
just
into,
had a
yeah,
baby and was very intentional in, well, his wife had the baby, but was very intentional in how they named their child, and it just I could feel the blessing in the name.
that's excellent. I was gonna say he didn't have the baby because he was old school, so
Yeah, no, he did not have the baby, his wife
there you
did,
go,
but
there you
together they they had the baby, and they named their child Eric Ezekiel, and Eric is leadership and royalty, and Ezekiel is God strengthens, and they have just given that child this blessing just in his name. So
it's marvelous, it's wonderful, as a matter of fact. So you've given us all sorts of tips. We're among the first to know what your middle name is, and you're all sworn to secrecy out there, okay?
yes, please.
Is there anything else that you'd like to, like a parting gift, for all of our dedicated listeners?
Try to be kind every day because our world is filled with things that are unkind and hateful and not ideal. And it really does not cost you anything to be kind. Even with people that you don't get along with, there are ways to be kind.
Yeah. I have nothing to add to that whatsoever, like she said, okay? Well, it's been a marvelous time with you, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you spending time with me and getting your energy out there, to all the people that will listen to this someday. You never know. This is pretty durable these days. We could have generations of people that would be able to find these old podcasts and come back and say, "Wow, those two were kind of odd," or "That was really cool." Oh, who was
Or
John
maybe some
Lennon?
of both. Or who's John or Walter Cronkite.
Walter Cronkite. That's exactly right. So anyway, I want to thank you one more time.
Thank you, Bill. It was my honor and privilege to get to be one of your 100 people.
Right back at you. And I'll tell you what, since you mentioned it, yes, we are simple questions for 100 people. And I want to just send you out into the world to do two things. First of all, have the best week ever while you're being kind. Okay. And then, second, reach out to somebody in your world, a friend of yours somewhere. I don't care. Send them a text message, an email, telephone call. Go see them, but just let them know that your world works because they're in it. That because of them, you have a life that's worth living. That's all for now. Bye-bye, y'all.
You've been listening to Simple Questions for 100 People, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can find every episode at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.